A millionaire marries an ugly beggar for a bet, but what he discovers on their wedding night shocks him. Before we dive into the story, share in the comments where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Nathan Parker, a cold and confident millionaire, radiated arrogance as he stood on the balcony of a lavish party. Nothing seemed to faze his demeanor until an old friend, Michael Carter, approached with a glass of wine in hand and a provocative smile. "Nathan, you're always saying money can buy anything, right?" Michael said, breaking the silence. Nathan took a sip of his champagne, his expression indifferent. "Because it can." Michael leaned against the balcony railing and pointed toward a figure sitting on the sidewalk below. A young woman, barefoot, wearing worn-out clothes, with a weary gaze. "See her?" Michael said, his tone challenging. "She's your next challenge. I bet $2 million you can't turn her into a high-society lady and stay married to her for 3 months. Nathan narrowed his eyes, locking onto the young woman for a moment. He didn't see a person, just a pawn in a game he was confident he could win. $2 million? He asked, a cynical smile forming. "You clearly underestimate my abilities, Michael." "Let's see, then." Michael raised his glass in a toast, his look daring. Nathan remained silent, staring at the scene below. The young woman seemed entirely oblivious to the world around her, a small plastic cup at her side, where a few coins clinked occasionally. "Looks like tonight's entertainment has begun," Nathan murmured before turning and heading back inside. Minutes later, he was on the sidewalk, just steps away from the young woman. As he approached, her hunched figure under the dim, yellow glow of a streetlight became clearer. Her disheveled hair framed a face marked by exhaustion, yet carried a silent strength that intrigued him. Her thin hands held a piece of cardboard with crooked writing. "Anything helps." "Excuse me," Nathan said, his tone more of a command than a request. The woman looked up, startled. Her blue eyes, dulled by hardship, revealed a latent strength Nathan hadn't expected. "What do you want?" she asked warily, shrinking further into herself. Nathan offered a smile that blended condescension and curiosity. "I have a proposition for you, something that could change your life." She frowned, suspicious, but said nothing. "I'm serious," he continued, kneeling to meet her eye level. "My name is Nathan Parker. I have money, a lot of it, and I need someone like you for a personal project." "Project?" she replied bitterly, laughing softly. Her worn teeth showed as she spoke. "I'm not anyone's guinea pig, Mr. Millionaire." Nathan ignored her sharp tone and pressed on with cold precision. "I'm willing to pay generously. You'll have food, clothes, a place to stay. All you need to do is marry me for 3 months." The woman blinked, incredulous. "You must be joking." "I don't joke about business," Nathan replied firmly. "It's simple. A marriage of convenience. No real commitment. After 3 months, we part ways and you walk away with more money than you've ever imagined." She sat in silence for a few moments, processing the absurd proposal. Her life had been a string of downward spirals since losing everything. Yet something about Nathan's authoritative tone irritated her deeply. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Because you're here," he replied bluntly. Nathan's cynical response nearly made her stand and walk away, but the weight of hunger and cold kept her rooted in place. "My name is Emily Clark," she said softly, "and if I agree, how do I know this isn't some sort of scam?" Nathan pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up beside them. A sharply dressed driver stepped out and opened the back door. "Get in," Nathan ordered. "We'll talk somewhere more comfortable." Emily hesitated, but the temptation to escape the street, even for a few hours, was too strong. She climbed into the car and Nathan followed, instructing the driver to take them to the nearest hotel. The silence during the ride was almost unbearable. Emily watched the city pass by through the window while Nathan, indifferent, typed something on his phone. When they arrived at the hotel, they were escorted to a luxurious suite. Emily could barely hide her astonishment. Plush carpets, refined wooden furniture, and a stunning view of the city created a scene she never could have imagined. Nathan ordered room service to bring food and clean clothes. Emily, still wary, stayed near the door, watching his every move. "Relax," Nathan said, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "I have no interest in hurting you. This is just part of a deal." A few minutes later, the food arrived. Emily ate without hesitation, feeling her stomach finally settle. Nathan observed her intently, analyzing her every gesture. "So, do you agree or not?" he asked once she finished eating. Emily wiped her mouth with a napkin and took a deep breath. "How much are you paying me?" $1 million, Nathan replied as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Emily nearly choked. The amount seemed unreal. With that kind of money, she could start over, maybe even help others like her. But the thought of compromising her dignity was unsettling. "I need some guarantees," she said, trying to regain control of the conversation. Nathan nodded. "Everything will be in writing. My lawyer will draft a contract. You'll have food, clothes, and a room at my mansion." "And the wedding?" she asked hesitantly. "Tomorrow," Nathan replied bluntly. "It'll be quick, just a formality." Emily ran her hand through her hair, feeling cornered. Nathan's words sounded final, leaving no room for negotiation. At last, she sighed and nodded. "All right." Nathan stood, satisfied. "Excellent. Rest tonight? Tomorrow marks the first day of the rest of our lives." Emily watched him leave the suite, leaving her alone in the luxurious room. The silence that followed was almost deafening. She knew she had made a risky decision, but at the same time, she felt like she had no other choice. The next morning, Emily was awakened by a soft knock on the door. The hotel housekeeper entered with a breakfast tray and neatly folded new clothes. Emily noticed the care in every detail, fine fabrics, neutral colors, all perfectly tailored to her size. As she ate, the weight of her decision sank in. She was selling 3 months of her life, but the promise of $1 million made her head spin. Starting over no longer felt like a distant dream. Shortly after, Nathan appeared, as polished as ever, holding a leather folder. He handed it to Emily. "Here's the contract. Read it, sign it, and we'll meet at the courthouse at 2 o'clock." Emily flipped through the document, her eyes scanning clauses and terms outlining every detail of the agreement. Everything seemed legitimate, but the formality felt unsettling. Still, she signed, feeling like each stroke of the pen marked a point of no return. The wedding was quick and emotionless. Just a few words exchanged in front of an impersonal judge, a few signatures, and it was done. Emily Clark was now officially Emily Parker, Nathan Parker's wife. There were no guests, just the driver and the lawyer as witnesses. As they left the courthouse, Nathan placed a hand on the small of Emily's back, guiding her to the car. She noticed he did it not with affection, but with mechanical precision, as if fulfilling a protocol. "And now?" Emily asked as the car moved through the busy streets. "Now, we go to my mansion. That's where you'll be staying for the next few months," Nathan said without looking up from his phone. The Parker mansion was as grand as Emily had imagined. Tall, wrought iron gates opened automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with perfectly manicured gardens. The house itself was massive, with white columns and large windows reflecting the sky. Inside, Emily was greeted by a team of staff. Nathan gave quick instructions, telling them to prepare a room for his new wife. Meanwhile, Emily remained silent, trying to take in her surroundings. By nightfall, Nathan invited her to dinner. The dining room was enormous, with a long table illuminated by a crystal chandelier. Emily sat at one end, Nathan at the other. The distance between them felt symbolic, but Nathan, indifferent, simply began eating. "How are you settling in?" he asked in an almost casual tone. "I'm not used to this much luxury," Emily admitted, glancing around. Nathan allowed a faint smile. "You'll get used to it." After dinner, Nathan walked Emily to the room prepared for her. In the hallway, their voices echoed softly until Emily stopped and turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, finally voicing the question that had been haunting her. Nathan crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "Because I can." Emily narrowed her eyes, feeling a mix of anger and curiosity. "This isn't just random. People like you don't do things like this without a reason." Nathan didn't answer. He simply gave a faint smile and stepped away. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, your transformation begins." Later that night, Emily sat alone in her room, perched on the edge of the bed, as memories from her past began to resurface. It wasn't just the grandeur of the mansion that unsettled her. There was something deeper. She realized she had crossed paths with Nathan before. Suddenly, a memory flashed in her mind. Years ago, sitting nervously in an interview room, she had dressed in her best outfit and clutched a meticulously prepared resume. The company? Parker Enterprises. And the interviewer? Nathan Parker. She recalled Nathan's cold gaze as he dismissed her with a harsh comment. We don't waste time on amateurs. That humiliation had shattered her confidence. Her life had unraveled afterward, and now, ironically, she was married to the man who had triggered her downfall. Anger boiled inside her. How could he not remember her? Or did he remember and simply not care? Determined, Emily left her room and went to the study, where she found Nathan reviewing documents. "I need to ask you something," she said, crossing her arms. Nathan looked up, surprised by the interruption. "What is it? Do you really not remember me?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan frowned, puzzled. "Should I?" Emily clenched her fists, fighting back tears. "A few years ago, I came to your company looking for a job. You humiliated me in front of everyone." Nathan studied her for a moment, as if trying to recall. Finally, he shrugged. "I interview dozens of people every month. I don't remember all of them." His indifference cut like a knife. "Of course you don't," she replied bitterly. "To you, we're all disposable." Nathan remained silent, but something in Emily's expression unsettled him. He stood and took a step toward her, but she was already walking away, returning to her room. Alone again, Emily felt the weight of the situation. This wasn't just a cold arrangement. It was a chance to face the man who had once destroyed her. But she was no longer the vulnerable young woman from years ago. The next morning, Emily awoke with the first rays of sunlight streaming through the massive windows. The weight of last night's conversation lingered, but she resolved not to let it consume her. She got up, took a shower, and went down for breakfast, where she found Nathan already seated, reading a newspaper. "Good morning," she said in a neutral tone. Nathan nodded, his eyes still on the paper. The silence between them was heavy, but Emily refused to be intimidated. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. "So, what's next?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Nathan lowered the newspaper and looked at her with a faint smile. "Now your transformation begins. We have a team of stylists, etiquette instructors, and even a posture coach. Soon, you'll be introduced to high society as my wife." Emily rolled her eyes. "As if expensive clothes will erase everything I've been through." Nathan ignored the remark. "Next week's business dinner will be the first test. I need you to be flawless." The following days were grueling for Emily. From early morning, she endured endless clothing fittings, etiquette lessons, and posture drills. Though she despised the superficiality of it all, she began to notice herself adapting to the new environment. Nathan, meanwhile, kept his distance but couldn't ignore the impact Emily was having on the household. She wasn't like the other women he had known. She didn't bow to his authority. One afternoon, as Emily practiced walking gracefully across the grand hall, Nathan entered and watched in silence. When she noticed him, she stopped and crossed her arms. "Enjoying the show?" she asked with sarcasm. Nathan gave a small smile. "Just assessing your progress. You're doing well." Emily scoffed. "Glad my performance meets your approval, Mr. Parker." Nathan stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. "Why does it always feel like you're ready to attack me?" "Maybe because you deserve it," she replied without hesitation. Nathan paused, surprised by her honesty. Then he took a step back and changed the subject. "Get ready, we're going out tonight." "Where?" Emily asked, suspicious. "A private dinner at a restaurant. I want to see how you handle yourself in public." Later that evening, Nathan and Emily arrived at one of the most upscale restaurants in the city. Emily, wearing an elegant dress, drew admiring glances but felt uncomfortable under the attention. Nathan, however, appeared completely at ease. During dinner, Nathan noticed that Emily was nervous. Her gaze shifted frequently, and she fidgeted with the strap of her dress. "Relax," he said in a low voice. "You're doing a great job." Emily looked up, surprised by his encouraging tone. "I'm not used to any of this." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "You'll adapt. Trust me." For a moment, Emily saw something different in his eyes. He wasn't the cold, calculating man she'd met before. There was something more human, almost vulnerable. After dinner, on the ride back to the mansion, the atmosphere in the car was lighter. Nathan commented on her behavior during dinner, pointing out small improvements she could make, but without his usual critical tone. "You're really taking this seriously, aren't you?" Emily asked, curious. Nathan glanced at her from the corner of his eye. "I always take my bets seriously." The mention of a bet made Emily tense. She still didn't know exactly what Nathan stood to gain from all this, But the idea of being just a pawn in some game left a bitter taste in her mouth. Later that night, while alone in her room, Emily decided to explore the mansion. She wandered through the quiet hallways until she came across a slightly open door leading to an office. Inside, a massive wooden desk was covered with documents and papers. Curious, Emily approached and began to look through the papers. Among contracts and financial reports, she found something that made her blood run cold. A printed conversation between Nathan and another man discussing the details of the bet. "So, has she agreed?" one message read. "Yes, it's only a matter of time before I win," Nathan's reply stated, the words dripping with indifference. Emily felt her stomach churn. She'd known there was more to Nathan's actions, but seeing the words in black and white made it all the more painful. Suddenly, the door opened, and Nathan walked in. When he saw Emily holding the papers, his expression hardened. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, his voice low and tense. Emily stared at him, clutching the papers tightly. "Is this how you see me? Just a bet to feed your ego?" Nathan stepped closer, trying to take the papers, but Emily pulled back. "Answer me," she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not as simple as it seems." "Not simple." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "You've toyed with my life like I'm some disposable object." "Emily," Nathan began, but she cut him off. "Don't you dare try to justify this," she shouted, throwing the papers onto the desk before storming out of the office. Nathan stood alone, staring at the scattered papers. For the first time in years, he felt as though he'd lost control. Emily could barely breathe as she rushed up the stairs, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Once inside her room, she locked the door and leaned against it, trying to calm herself. Discovering the bet had shattered any tolerance she'd built over the past few days. "I can't stay here," she thought, as tears of anger and humiliation streamed down her face. She looked around, desperately searching for anything that could help her escape. That night, while everyone slept, Emily put her plan into action. She dressed in simple clothes and packed a small bag with the few belongings she'd managed to gather since arriving at the mansion. Carefully, she opened the window, trying not to make a sound, and climbed down the trellis that held the mansion's rose vines. The cold night air enveloped her as she finally reached the ground. Emily looked back at the mansion's imposing silhouette against the night sky. Part of her wanted to scream, to make Nathan feel the pain she carried. But instead, she turned and ran toward the road without looking back. The streets were empty, and Emily walked for hours, ignoring the exhaustion and the biting cold against her skin. When she finally reached the city center, she found shelter in a subway station, where she curled up on a bench and tried to sleep. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Nathan woke early and noticed Emily's absence at breakfast. At first, he wasn't concerned, thinking she just needed space after the argument the night before. But when one of the staff mentioned they hadn't seen her since dinner, Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. "Check her room," he ordered, trying to stay calm. A few minutes later, the butler returned with a worried expression. "Mr. Parker, the room is empty, and the window, it's open." Nathan immediately ran upstairs and entered Emily's room. The bed was untouched and her clothes still hung in the closet. He walked to the window and saw marks on the trellis. "She ran away," he murmured, clenching his fists. Without wasting time, Nathan grabbed his phone and made several calls, reaching out to his contacts to try to find her. The thought of Emily wandering the streets alone unsettled him. He couldn't explain it, but something inside him was driving him to find her, not because of the bet, but because of something new growing in his heart: regret. Meanwhile, Emily wandered aimlessly, struggling to stay on her feet. Her strength was fading, and her fever was rising. The exhaustion of the past few days was catching up with her, but she refused to stop. Every step she took was a statement of her resilience, a proof that she wouldn't let Nathan or any other man control her again. At dawn, Emily reached a small square and sat on a wooden bench. Her hands trembled and her vision blurred. She knew she needed help, but her pride kept her from asking. Closing her eyes, she felt her body give in to exhaustion. Nathan, on the other hand, had already started searching the city streets. Driving his own car, he scanned every corner, every bench, looking for any sign of Emily. Guilt consumed him. He had never imagined his actions could cause so much pain. Hours later, with the sun high in the sky, he finally found her. Emily was lying on a bench, curled up under a thin blanket someone had likely given her. Her face was pale, and she was trembling with fever. "Emily," Nathan called out, running toward her. She slowly opened her eyes, her unfocused gaze meeting his. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm here to take you home," he said, his voice firm but full of concern. "I don't have a home," she replied bitterly. Nathan picked her up, ignoring her weak attempts to resist, and carried her to the car. On the way to the hospital, he remained silent, his thoughts a whirlwind. He knew he'd need more than words to regain Emily's trust. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed that Emily was dehydrated and running a high fever. Nathan stayed by her side, watching her sleep as the medical staff cared for her. A heavy weight pressed on his chest. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't in control of his own life. Hours later, when Emily finally woke up, she found Nathan sitting by her bed. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were fixed on her. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice still weak. "Because I care," Nathan answered sincerely. Emily let out a faint laugh, her voice a mere whisper. "You don't know what it means to care about anyone but yourself." Nathan lowered his head, his hands gripping his knees. "Maybe you're right, but I'm trying to change." She watched him silently, unsure whether to believe him. Her mind was too tired to process his words. The next morning, Emily woke to the soft sound of footsteps entering the room. Still weak, she turned her head slowly and saw a nurse adjusting her IV. The sight was comforting, but also a stark reminder of her vulnerability. Nathan was nowhere to be seen, allowing her to relax a bit more. Not long after, the door opened, and Nathan walked in, carrying a small paper bag. He was dressed casually, a rare sight given his usual formal attire. His eyes showed fatigue but also determination. "I brought something for you," he said, placing the bag on the bedside table. Emily simply watched him without speaking. Nathan pulled up a chair and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. "It's soup. You need to regain your strength," he continued, opening the bag. "I don't want anything from you," Emily replied, her voice hoarse and cold. Nathan sighed, but didn't push. He knew forcing anything now would be pointless. Instead, he stayed seated, letting the silence fill the room. "Why are you here, Nathan?" Emily finally asked, breaking the quiet. He hesitated before answering. "Because I care." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know what that means." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I've spent my whole life not truly caring about anyone. But you made me see things I never wanted to face." She looked away, her hands gripping the bedsheet. "That doesn't change what you did." "I know," he said, his voice heavy, "and I don't expect you to forgive me anytime soon, but I'll prove that I can be different." Emily remained silent, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds were still too fresh. In the days that followed, Nathan stayed by Emily's side, ensuring she received all the care she needed. He coordinated with the doctors, made sure the food was to her liking, and even brought her books to help pass the time. Emily, though still resentful, couldn't ignore his efforts. One afternoon, as she flipped through one of the books Nathan had brought, she found something unexpected. A carefully folded letter tucked between the pages. It was handwritten in Nathan's firm script. "Emily, I know words aren't enough to undo what I've done, but I need you to know I'm trying. I've never been someone who admits mistakes, but you've made me look in the mirror and see who I really am. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want to become someone worthy of your respect. Nathan." Emily read the letter over and over, trying to decipher the intentions behind the words. Was there sincerity in them, or was this just another attempt to manipulate her? That night, when Nathan walked into the room, Emily held the letter up to him. "What is this?" she asked, her voice firm. Nathan glanced at the letter and sighed. "It's my attempt to be honest." "Honest?" Emily shook her head. "You used me, humiliated me. How can I believe anything you say?" Nathan stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. "I know I have no right to ask for your trust, but I'm here, and I'll stay here, even if it takes years for you to believe in me." Tears filled Emily's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you." Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. The next day, the doctors informed Emily she was well enough to leave the hospital. Nathan wasted no time arranging everything to bring her back to the mansion. Emily, though reluctant, knew she had nowhere else to go. When they arrived at the mansion, Nathan surprised Emily with something she never expected. He had transformed one of the rooms into a small art studio, complete with canvases, brushes, and paints in every color. "What is this?" she asked, stunned. "You mentioned once that you liked painting," Nathan said with a shy smile. "I thought you might like a space of your own." Emily was speechless. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. For the first time, she saw something in Nathan beyond the arrogant billionaire. In the days that followed, Emily began spending more time in the studio, exploring her creativity. Painting gave her a sense of freedom, something she hadn't felt in years. Nathan, for his part, kept his distance, respecting her space while quietly ensuring her comfort. One afternoon, as Emily painted, Nathan appeared in the doorway, watching her in silence. "You're talented," he said at last. Emily paused, looking at him. "I didn't know you had an eye for art." Nathan shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "I'm learning." She laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. The days at the mansion settled into a calmer rhythm. Emily spent most of her time in the art studio, while Nathan was occupied with his business affairs. There was a sort of truce between them, a fragile balance neither dared to disturb, but Nathan wasn't satisfied. He knew words alone wouldn't be enough to rebuild Emily's trust. He needed to take action, to prove he was willing to change, not just for her, but for himself. One afternoon, Nathan entered the studio while Emily was focused on a new painting. He waited for her to notice him, but she kept working, deliberately ignoring him. "I need your help," he said finally, breaking the silence. Emily stopped, wiping her hands on a cloth. "My help?" Nathan nodded. "I want to start supporting social projects, and I think you can help me decide where to begin." She looked at him, skeptical. "Since when do you care about that?" "Since I realized the world doesn't revolve around me," he replied honestly. Emily hesitated for a moment. Despite her reluctance to trust him, the idea of doing something meaningful appealed to her. "All right," she said at last, "but I'm not doing this for you." "I wouldn't expect anything else." "Yeah," Nathan replied with a small smile. In the days that followed, Nathan and Emily began visiting charities and community projects. He took her to shelters, rehabilitation centers, and schools in underprivileged areas. During each visit, Emily noticed how Nathan interacted differently with people. He seemed genuinely interested in hearing their stories and understanding their needs. One visit was particularly impactful. They went to a shelter for women who had experienced domestic violence. While Emily talked with some of the residents, Nathan approached a young woman holding a baby. He crouched down to her level and began asking about her story. "It's hard to trust people after what I've been through," the young woman said, holding the baby tighter. Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "I understand." Emily, observing from a distance, was surprised. She hadn't expected Nathan to show such genuine empathy. On the way home, the car ride was heavy with silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Emily sensed that something was changing in Nathan, though a barrier still remained, preventing her from fully believing in him. One evening, Nathan decided to take a bold step. He organized a special dinner just for the two of them. The dining room was decorated with candles and flowers, and soft music played in the background. "What's this?" Emily asked as she saw the table. "A thank you," Nathan replied, pulling out a chair for her, "for helping me over the past few days." Emily hesitated but eventually sat down. The dinner was unlike any they had shared before. Nathan was more open, sharing stories about his childhood and how he grew up in a cold environment where emotions were seen as weakness. "I think that's why I always used money as a shield," he admitted, staring at his wine glass. "It was easier than dealing with real people." Emily listened in silence, absorbing every word. She had never imagined Nathan admitting something like this. "And now?" she finally asked. "What do you want?" Nathan looked up, locking eyes with her. "I want to be better. Someone you might one day respect." She stayed quiet for a long moment before replying. "That doesn't depend only on you, Nathan." "I know," he said with a sigh, "but I'll keep trying." After dinner, as Nathan cleared the table, Emily went to her studio and retrieved a small canvas she had painted in the past few days. It was a serene landscape with an open field and a sunset sky. "Here," she said, handing the painting to Nathan. He looked at the canvas, surprised. "It's beautiful. I thought you might like it," Emily replied with a shrug. Nathan smiled, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you." In the days that followed, Nathan continued to show small changes in his behavior. He treated the mansion staff with more respect, listened to suggestions from his employees at the company, and dedicated more time to the social projects he and Emily had started together. Emily, in turn, began to lower her defenses, though cautiously. She knew trusting Nathan again would be a long and complicated process, but little by little, something within her started to shift. One afternoon, as they walked through the mansion's garden, Nathan suddenly stopped and looked at Emily. "I want to show you something," he said. Curious, she followed him to a small cabin at the back of the property. When they entered, Emily saw the place was filled with mementos from Nathan's childhood, photos, old toys, and even drawings he had made as a child. "I've never shown this to anyone," he said as she explored the space. Emily picked up one of the photos and saw a young Nathan next to an elegant woman, who she assumed was his mother. "You had a different life than I imagined," she remarked. Nathan gave a melancholic smile. "My mother always said money could buy many things, but never happiness. I think it took me a long time to understand that." Emily placed the photo back on the shelf and turned to him. "Maybe there's still time to learn." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as Emily walked slowly through the mansion's garden. The recent days had been intense, full of unexpected moments. She could feel something changing within herself, though there was still an immovable barrier keeping her from fully letting her guard down. That evening, Nathan appeared in the art studio as Emily finished a new painting. He looked hesitant, something unusual for the man who always exuded confidence. "May I come in?" he asked, almost timidly. Emily looked at him for a moment before nodding. Nathan stepped in and approached her slowly, watching the canvas she was working on. "It's beautiful," he said, referring to the landscape she was painting. "Thank you," Emily replied, keeping her focus on the painting. Nathan took a deep breath before continuing. "I need to tell you something I've never shared with anyone." Emily set the brush down and turned to him, intrigued. "I'm listening." Nathan began pacing the studio, his hands in his pockets as though gathering courage. "When I was a kid, my mother was my only connection to the real world. My father was a cold man who believed success came before everything, even family. He taught me to be ruthless, to never show weakness." He paused for a moment, his eyes distant, lost in memories. "My mother, on the other hand, was the opposite. She believed love and empathy mattered more than any amount of money. But she died when I was only 12. After that, my father made sure I became the man he wanted me to be, cold, calculating, and driven by numbers." Emily listened intently, absorbing every word. There was something painfully human about the way he spoke of his past. "And now?" she asked gently. "Do you still think you need to be that man?" Nathan shook his head slowly. "No. You've shown me there's more to life than I was willing to see." A long silence followed before Emily finally spoke. "I have something to say too." Nathan looked at her curiously as Emily lowered her gaze. "When you humiliated me in that interview years ago, it was the moment I lost all faith in myself. It broke me in ways you can't imagine." Her voice trembled, and Nathan felt a crushing weight in his chest. He knew he had caused more harm than he could ever undo, but Emily's honesty hit him like a blow. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice carrying a sincerity that surprised even him. Emily looked up at him, and for the first time she saw a vulnerable man, stripped of his usual arrogance. She knew forgiveness would be a long process, but at that moment, she decided to take the first step. "I want to believe you, Nathan. But you need to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight." Nathan nodded, his expression serious. "I know, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." In the days that followed, Nathan threw himself even more into social projects. He and Emily worked together, visiting underserved communities and speaking with people who had faced challenges similar to Emily's. With each interaction, Emily began to see that Nathan truly was changing. During one of these visits, they met a young woman named Lily, who was about to drop out of school due to financial difficulties. Emily, moved by her story, decided to act. "Nathan, can we help?" she asked, determination in her eyes. Nathan smiled. "We can, and we will." With Nathan's support, Lily received a scholarship and financial assistance. Emily felt a warmth in her heart as she saw the joy in the young woman's eyes. It was as if, by helping her, Emily was also healing herself a little more. Later that evening, back at the mansion, Emily sat in the living room, watching the fire crackle in the fireplace. Nathan entered and sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Today was special," he said, breaking the silence. Emily nodded. "Yes, it was." They sat quietly for a moment before Nathan spoke again. "Emily, can I ask you something?" She looked at him, waiting. "Do you think there's still a chance for us?" Emily felt her heart race. It was a difficult question, but she knew she had to be honest. "I don't know, Nathan. I think we still have a lot to work through." Nathan nodded, accepting her answer without protest. He knew that if there was any hope, he would have to keep proving to her that he was willing to change. The days passed slowly, but life at Nathan's mansion began to find a rhythm. Emily became more and more involved in the social projects, and Nathan continued to show small but meaningful changes in his behavior. Though the emotional distance between them began to narrow, Emily was still hesitant to fully trust him. One sunny afternoon, Nathan invited Emily to take a walk in the garden. She hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. As they strolled among the flowers, Nathan spoke about a new project, building a community center to provide education and job training for people in vulnerable situations. "I want you to lead it with me," he said, smiling encouragingly. Emily stopped, surprised. "Me?" "Yes. You understand these people's needs better than anyone. And I want you to know that I trust you." She stayed silent for a moment, taking in his words. Despite a lingering shadow of doubt, Emily couldn't ignore the warmth growing in her heart. "I'll think about it," she finally replied. Nathan nodded, respecting her need for time. Later that day, while Emily was in the art studio, she received an unexpected call. It was from Clara, an old friend from her time on the streets. Clara's voice, full of emotion, stirred a mix of nostalgia and joy in Emily. "Emily, I heard you're doing well now and working on social projects. I need to see you," Clara said, almost breathless. Emily arranged to meet her at a cafe downtown the following day. When she told Nathan about the meeting, he insisted on accompanying her. "I won't interfere, but I want to make sure you're safe," he said seriously. Emily rolled her eyes but accepted his offer. The next day, as she waited for Clara at the cafe, Emily felt a tinge of nervousness. It had been years since they last met, and she didn't know what to expect. When Clara finally arrived, the two embraced warmly, reminiscing about the hard times they had shared. "You've changed, Emily," Clara remarked after a few moments of conversation. "You seem stronger." "I'm still learning," Emily replied with a modest smile. As they talked, Emily noticed Nathan sitting discreetly at a nearby table. Though he was there solely to ensure her safety, his presence brought her an unexpected sense of comfort. On the drive back to the mansion, Emily broke the silence. "Thank you for bringing me here today." Nathan smiled, surprised by her sudden gratitude. "There's no need to thank me. But I want to," she insisted. "You've been different, and I've noticed." Nathan was quiet for a moment before responding. "I just want to do the right thing, Emily." The sincerity in his voice made Emily's heart waver. Though she wanted to deny it, she couldn't ignore that Nathan was indeed changing. Let's play a little game for those who read the comments. Type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who get to this point will understand. Now, let's continue the story. However, things took a turn when Michael, the friend who had proposed the bet, reappeared unexpectedly. He showed up at the mansion unannounced, a cynical smile on his face. "Nathan, how's it going with your new wife?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Emily, who was in the garden, froze when she heard his voice. She decided to quietly approach and hide behind a column to listen. "What do you want, Michael?" Nathan asked, clearly irritated. "Oh, I'm just curious. After all, the bet's almost up, isn't it? You must be looking forward to collecting your $2 million. Emily felt a chill run through her. She knew about the bet, but hearing Michael speak about it so carelessly reopened old wounds she was trying to heal. "The bet doesn't matter anymore," Nathan replied firmly. "I canceled it." Michael laughed, disbelieving. "Canceled? You've got to be kidding." "I'm not," Nathan said, his tone serious. "I don't need the money, and I definitely don't need the bet." Michael looked at him, surprised. "So you're really falling for her?" Nathan didn't respond, but his expression said it all. Emily stepped out from her hiding spot, her heart torn between anger and confusion. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nathan turned, startled to see her. "Emily, I can explain." "I don't want explanations, Nathan. I want the truth," she shouted, tears filling her eyes. Michael, sensing the tension, stepped back uncomfortably. "I think I'll leave you two to sort this out." As he left, Nathan tried to approach Emily, but she backed away. "Did you cancel the bet?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes, I did." "Why?" Nathan took a deep breath. "Because you're more important than any stupid challenge." Emily stood silent, her emotions in turmoil. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of being hurt again was overwhelming. "I don't know if I can trust you, Nathan. Not after all this," she finally said. "Then don't trust me," he replied, his tone calm yet firm. "Just watch. Let my actions prove what my words can't." Emily looked at him, trying to decipher the sincerity in his eyes. Though doubts lingered, something inside her told her he was being truthful. The days following Emily and Nathan's confrontation were tense. Emily spent hours in the studio, trying to sort through her thoughts, while Nathan remained determined to prove his intentions were genuine. Despite the distance that still existed between them, it was impossible to ignore the visible transformation in Nathan. That morning, Emily sat on the terrace with a cup of tea, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. Her restless mind wandered between painful memories of the past and recent moments of genuine connection with Nathan. She knew she had to make a decision soon, but the fear of trusting again left her paralyzed. Nathan appeared in the doorway, hesitant. He held a folder in his hands, his expression serious but lacking the arrogance she had once associated with him. "May I join you?" he asked, respecting the space she so deeply valued. Emily nodded, and Nathan sat at the table, placing the folder between them. "I brought something for you," he said, opening the folder and carefully taking out a set of documents. "This is proof that I ended the bet. There's no longer any connection between me and Michael." Emily picked up the papers and read them carefully. The signatures and dates confirmed that Nathan had indeed returned the money from the bet and had even donated a significant amount to charity. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, looking up at him. "Because I want you to know I'm being honest. I don't expect you to trust me right away, but I want you to see that I'm trying to be a different man." Emily set the papers aside and turned her gaze back to the horizon. She knew Nathan was making an effort, but the wound from his betrayal still ached. "You want to be different, but that doesn't change what happened," she said, her voice calm but firm. "It doesn't," Nathan admitted, leaning forward slightly. "But I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." The silence between them was heavy with unspoken emotions. Emily knew that sooner or later she would have to confront her own feelings about Nathan. In the days that followed, Nathan continued to respect Emily's space while also demonstrating his change through concrete actions. He became deeply involved in social projects, visiting communities, and listening to the stories of those who were benefiting from the initiatives. Emily, though still cautious, couldn't help but notice his genuine dedication. One afternoon, while they were visiting a shelter for at-risk youth, a teenage girl named Sophie caught Emily's attention. The 16-year-old was pregnant and overwhelmed with hopelessness. "I don't know how I'm going to take care of my baby," Sophie confessed, tears streaming down her face. Emily's heart ached. She sat beside the girl and held her hand. "You're not alone. We'll help you find a way." Nathan watched from a distance, admiring the way Emily connected with people. After that visit, he decided it was time to take an important step. That evening, he arranged a special dinner at the mansion, just for the two of them. The dining room was decorated with candles and flowers, and soft music played in the background. When Emily walked in, she paused, surprised by the warm and inviting atmosphere. "What is this?" she asked, looking at Nathan, who stood by the table. "A way to thank you for everything you've been doing," he replied, pulling out a chair for her. Reluctantly, Emily sat down, watching Nathan's every move. He seemed more vulnerable than ever, but also more determined. The dinner began in silence, but gradually Nathan started to open up. He shared stories about his childhood, the challenges of growing up under the shadow of a strict father, and how the loss of his mother had shaped him. "I used money as a way to avoid pain," he admitted, looking directly at Emily. "But I see now that it turned me into someone I don't want to be." Emily listened intently, torn between empathy and skepticism. She could tell Nathan was being sincere, but she wasn't sure if she could fully trust him yet. "I want to believe you, Nathan," she said finally, "but there's still a part of me that's afraid." Nathan nodded, accepting her words without argument. "And I'll keep trying. I'm not going to give up on proving I'm worthy of your trust." After dinner, Nathan walked Emily to her art studio. Before saying goodnight, he pulled something from his pocket, a small silver butterfly pendant. "My mom gave this to me when I was a child," he said, holding out the pendant to Emily. "She used to say that butterflies symbolize transformation. I want you to have it, as a reminder that we all have the ability to change." Emily took the pendant, feeling the symbolic weight of the gift. For a moment she was speechless, but then she looked at Nathan and gave him a faint smile. "Thank you," she said softly. In the days that followed, Emily began to notice small changes within herself. Although she still kept some distance from Nathan, moments of connection started to happen naturally. A casual conversation in the garden, a glance exchanged during a meeting. These small gestures showed that the barrier between them was beginning to fade. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, Nathan suddenly stopped and looked at Emily. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her to a small cabin at the back of the property. When they stepped inside, Emily was surprised to see that the cabin was filled with mementos from Nathan's childhood. Photos, old toys, and even letters he had written to his mother as a child. "This was my refuge," Nathan explained with a nostalgic smile. Emily picked up one of the letters and read it silently. In it, a young Nathan wrote about his dreams and fears, revealing a vulnerable side she had never imagined. "You really are changing," she said, placing the letter back on the shelf. Nathan looked at her, his eyes filled with hope. "I'm trying for you." Emily stayed quiet for a moment before responding. "Maybe there's still a chance for us." The days following their visit to Nathan's cabin were marked by introspection and hesitation. Emily knew she was nearing a crucial decision, but her fear of being hurt again made her hold back. Nathan, on the other hand, seemed increasingly certain of his commitment. He didn't pressure Emily, but made a point of being present, showing that he was willing to face any challenge to prove his transformation. One evening, while Emily was in the studio finishing a painting, Nathan appeared at the door. He held 2 glasses of wine and seemed more relaxed than usual. "May I come in?" he asked with a slight smile. Emily nodded, and he approached, handing her one of the glasses. They stood in silence for a moment, observing the painting Emily was working on. It was a portrait of a butterfly, perched on a flower, its vibrant colors standing out against the soft background. "It's beautiful," Nathan said sincerely. "Thank you," Emily replied with a small smile. Nathan took a sip of wine before speaking again. "You know, the transformation of a butterfly has always fascinated me. It starts as something so small and limited, but over time it becomes something entirely different." Emily glanced at him, recognizing the parallel he was trying to draw. "And you believe people can change like that?" "I believe they can if they truly want to," he replied firmly. She stayed silent, processing his words. Despite her lingering doubts, Emily couldn't deny that Nathan was different. The next morning, Nathan announced he had planned a trip. "I want to show you something special," he said mysteriously. Emily hesitated, but eventually agreed. A private plane took them to a small village in the mountains, a peaceful place surrounded by breathtaking landscapes. Upon arrival, Nathan led her to a simple yet cozy house he had prepared especially for the occasion. "Why did you bring me here?" Emily asked, intrigued. Nathan looked around, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. "This place reminds me of how life can be simple and yet so full of meaning. I wanted us to have a moment away from everything, so we can truly connect." During their time there, Emily and Nathan shared moments that once seemed impossible. They walked together on trails, cooked simple meals, and talked about their lives, hopes, and fears. Emily began to see a side of Nathan he had hidden for so long, a human, vulnerable side that deeply moved her. On one of these walks, as they rested by a lakeside, Nathan broke the silence. "Emily, I know I still have a lot to prove to you, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, this change in me is real." She looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "And what do you want from me, Nathan?" "Just a chance," he replied simply. Emily felt a lump in her throat. For so long she had built walls around her heart. But now, standing before Nathan, those walls were beginning to crumble. When they returned to the mansion, Emily felt different. There was a clarity in her thoughts that she hadn't had before. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she could trust Nathan again. Still, she knew the final decision needed to be made carefully. The morning air was crisp and fresh, and the soft sunlight was beginning to brighten the mansion. Emily woke slowly, the golden rays slipping through the partially open curtains. Sitting up in bed, she looked around, taking in the peaceful silence that enveloped the house. Something inside her had shifted over the past few days. The confusion that had haunted her for so long was starting to lift. After their trip to the mountains, Emily felt as though the walls she'd built around her heart were finally coming down. She remembered every moment she'd shared with Nathan. The deep conversations, the spontaneous laughter, and the constant care he had shown. All of it pointed to a truth she was afraid to admit. Nathan had truly changed, and she could no longer deny the impact he was having on her life. Emily went downstairs for breakfast and found Nathan at the table. He greeted her with a warm smile, setting aside the newspaper as soon as he saw her. "Good morning," he said in the gentle tone that had become so common lately. "Good morning," Emily replied, sitting across from him. The silence between them was comfortable. Nathan poured her a cup of coffee, watching as she took her first sip. He could sense something had changed, but didn't want to push her. After breakfast, Nathan suggested they take a walk in the garden. Emily agreed, and together they strolled along the flower-lined path. The quiet was filled with the songs of birds and the soft rustle of trees in the breeze. When they reached a small stone bench under an old tree, Nathan stopped and turned to face her. "Emily, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice serious. She looked at him, waiting. "A while ago, I promised I'd do everything I could to earn back your trust. I need to know, have I made any progress?" Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his question. She met his gaze, noticing the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. "You've changed, Nathan," she admitted. "And yes, you're earning my trust back." Nathan smiled, but there was something else he needed to say. "Then I have another question," he said, lowering himself to one knee and pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Emily gasped, surprised, as Nathan opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. "Emily Clark, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not because of a contract, but because of love?" His words hung in the air, and Emily felt tears well up in her eyes. For a moment she was speechless, her heart racing. Finally, she smiled and nodded. "Yes, Nathan, I will." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced under the shade of the tree. It was a simple moment, yet profoundly meaningful, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The wedding took place just a few weeks later in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's garden. Only a few close friends and partners from their social projects were present, but the love and joy in the air were undeniable. Emily wore a light lace dress that made her look almost ethereal, while Nathan, in a sharp suit, couldn't take his eyes off her. During their vows, Nathan held Emily's hands tightly, his voice filled with emotion. "Emily, you've taught me the true meaning of love, patience, and redemption. I promise to stand by your side through every moment, good or bad, and dedicate my life to making you happy." With tears in her eyes, Emily responded, "Nathan, you've shown me that people can change and that love can grow even in the most unlikely circumstances. I promise to love you and walk by your side as we build our future together." The applause and smiles from their guests followed their kiss, sealing their commitment to one another. For the first time, Emily felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. Their first year of marriage was full of challenges, but also moments of joy and growth. Together, Emily and Nathan worked to expand their social projects, helping hundreds of people rebuild their lives. Their relationship deepened, rooted in trust and genuine love. One morning, as they were in the kitchen preparing breakfast together, Emily turned to Nathan with a shy smile. "I have some news for you," she said, her eyes sparkling. Curious, Nathan stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "What is it?" "We're going to have a baby," Emily revealed, her voice filled with emotion. For a moment, Nathan was speechless, but soon a radiant smile lit up his face. He stepped closer and embraced her tightly. "This is wonderful, Emily," he exclaimed, his voice filled with emotion. The news brought even more joy to their lives, and the following months were spent preparing the baby's room and planning for their future as a family. The day Grace Parker was born was one of the most emotional moments in Emily and Nathan's lives. When they finally held their daughter in their arms, both felt an instant connection, as if all the challenges of the past had prepared them for that moment. "She's perfect," Emily whispered, tears in her eyes. "Just like her mother," Nathan replied, gently stroking Grace's head. Grace's arrival further strengthened the bond between them, and the mansion, once marked by coldness and formality, became a warm, loving home. The following years were filled with achievements. The community center that Nathan and Emily had founded became a beacon of hope, helping thousands of people find new opportunities. Emily continued painting, using her art to raise funds for social projects, while Nathan became a mentor to young entrepreneurs aiming to make a difference. Grace grew up surrounded by love, her laughter filling the house with joy. Nathan and Emily, now partners in every sense of the word, looked to the future with hope and gratitude. One evening, as they watched Grace sleep, Nathan held Emily's hand and whispered, "You've changed my life in ways I never imagined." Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you've shown me that love can bloom in the most unexpected places." Together, they looked ahead, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would always stand by each other, united by the love that transformed them. Do you think Emily did the right thing by forgiving Nathan? Share your thoughts in the comments. How would you rate this story from 0 to 10? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to keep up with all our stories. And be sure to check out more emotional stories by clicking here on the end screen.